Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Welcome back to a brand new series. Welcome to part 3. Welcome to part 3. Now, if you haven't watched part 1 and part 2, start from part 1 and part 2. And in fact, I just started a playlist to organize the series, so go to the playlist section. Anyways, in this book, we are reading some legendary literature left behind by the ancestors. Now, this book came out back in the year 1811, right? And this book was written by one of King Henry Christophe's close friends, one of his close associates, one of the high-ranking men in the government, a gentleman by the name of Julien Prévost, right? And this book is from his first-person perspective of the rise of Christophe and his wife to the status of king and queen of the nation. Now, part 1, it started off at the death of Dessalines, right? Now, when Dessalines died, the military was split into two factions, the northern military and the southern military, right? The north controlled by Christophe, the south controlled by the southern mixed race generals like Alexander Pichon. And in part 1 and part 2, we discuss the civil war that took place between the two factions from 1807 to 1811. Now, at the end of part 2, the civil war has now ended and Christophe has now consolidated power fully over the north. All the towns and cities have fully come under his authority, and now the border has pretty much been settled between the two factions on which territory they will control. Now, before we jump into part 3, I want to go back to a segment in part 2 where the author of the book, like I said, this is one of Christophe's close friends, one of his close associates, right? Where he was actually describing Christophe. I believe this was actually towards the end of the year 1810, after he has fully defeated the southern rebels and taken control over the north. I want to get into something he said about Christophe, you know, how he described his close friend. Jump into the clip. I'll be right back. Christophe visited the provinces. Everywhere he is received, not as a conqueror, but as a revitalizing genius who comes to visit these regions. His improving eye embraces all parts. He has the sweet satisfaction of seeing that everywhere the farmers, regularly paid a quarter of the revenue they produce, bless him for the comfort they now enjoy. If unjust and greedy farmers no longer defraud the wages of their work and do not fatten themselves with their sweat, if cattle no longer ravage their food places, if the banana ripens on the beloved banana tree, it is Christophe that these men of nature owe. Christophe animates industry. He inflames the commerce. In his presence, the people burst into raptures. Unequivocal pledges of a love and an attachment that borders on idolatry. From his palace, he transports himself under the thatch of the farmer, as into the barracks of the soldier, and always their happiness is the constant object of his most lively and his most tender solicitudes. All right, we back. Now, I want to touch on that, right? The author in the book, if you notice, he said, Christophe from his palace, he transports himself under the thatch of the farmer, as into the barracks of the soldier, right? And one thing about Christophe that they always said during his time in power was how he would never isolate himself from the daily life of the common people, right? He would always be amongst the people, even though, you know, mega rich, super powerful black man in a massive palace, but he would always come and be amongst the farmers, be amongst the people. He would be at the market. You would see Christophe, you know, on his horse riding through the city in the trenches, right? Not in the gated community. It would be like, imagine a king in the modern day or a leader in the modern day going into the inner cities with all his jewelry on, with all his entourage, right? Not scared of nothing. You see, in the modern day, we would never, come back to the hood. But Christophe back in those days, he was really good in every hood, right? He would be amongst the farmers, be amongst the soldiers, be amongst the people, be amongst the civilians. Really, our ancestors was really different, man. They was really different. And that's one of the things I admire the most, because Christophe was very different from the other monarchs at the time. For example, the European monarchs, they wouldn't be amongst the working class people, right? To them, that's beneath them, right? I'm the aristocracy, right? I'm the elite. I'm royalty. I can't be amongst the peasantry, right? But Christophe, it was the complete opposite. He would be amongst the people, and not only be amongst the people, but he would get loved by the people, right? Even when the author said, in his presence, the people burst into raptures. So that's one thing I love about our kings, in contrast to the kings of other cultures who isolated themselves in the halls of power and would never be amongst the people. Anyway, let's get into part 3, man. As you already know, this book is entitled The Official Account of the Glorious Events that Brought the Royal Majesties to the Throne of Haiti. And as I mentioned before, this book was written by one of Christophe's close friends. So, like I said, very exclusive ancestral literature. Let's get into part 3. The Haitians had just celebrated the 8th year of our independence. And if the dawn of this beautiful day did not yet see them united, At least they were sufficiently persuaded by the great things Christophe had done to hope that he alone had the will as well as the power to consolidate and strengthen the foundations of this independence, the object of our wishes. For a long time, the well-spoken opinion of the most respectable and enlightened citizens had been to place Christophe on the throne. They had recognized the inadequacy of the title with which they had invested him in times of calamity. The leader of a nation, a warrior nation, must never lose sight of the fact that the moment it lays aside its warlike character, it will be the moment it runs the risk of annihilating its existence, or rather that its existence is essentially linked to its martial ardor. This leader, I say, could not retain any longer the qualification of a dignity that did not convey the idea of sovereign power. The revision of the Constitution was therefore decided. The State Council worked ardently on this subject, but its work, which was to offer a monument to the gratitude or recognition of the Haitians by awarding the crown to Christophe, making it hereditary in his illustrious house, could not remain a secret. It transpired, and it was during a trip to Fort Dauphin on March 26, a day before, that the head of state was greeted and proclaimed as the king, his beloved wife, the Queen of Haiti, and their son, the royal prince. This sublime impulse, once given, the electric flame is not more prompt than the surge with which it communicated itself. And the general assent of all classes of society proved that this good and magnanimous people had foreseen this great and glorious event. Also, with the transport of love and joy, their majesties were received on their arrival in the capital. It served them no purpose to have arrived there at night. They found all the people standing, hastening to lavish upon them their homage, these congratulations so sincere and so touching when they come from the heart. Their majesties received that very night the homage and congratulations of all the civil and military bodies and those of the foreign merchants established in the capital. Now, time out. I believe now we're talking about Christophe's coronation as the king of the north, along with his wife as the queen. And I guess this is, the author of the book, Julien Prévost, giving us his account of the events of that day. Now let's continue. The Council of State, having formed itself into a general council, and having for this purpose called upon all the generals of the army and the navy, and those of the principal citizens whom it deemed worthy of admitting to its work, to give them greater splendor, and having put the finishing touches to its immortal work, traveled in full dress on April 4th to the palace of their majesties, presented by the Grand Master of Ceremonies to their majesties, who were surrounded by the royal family. His Excellency, Lieutenant General Paul Romain, organ of the Grand Council, expressed himself in these terms. Now, time out. Now, General Paul Romain, now time out. Now, for those of y'all that watch my other series I dropped sometime last year, the biography of Christophe, we mentioned this individual right here, this beloved ancestor right here, Paul Romain. Now, Paul Romain, that was one of Christophe's day one homies, right? Back when they was young boys, in their 20s, early 20s, probably even late teens, right? That was one of Christophe's day one homies back when Christophe didn't have nothing, when he was just a nobody. Paul Romain was his close friend, and now Paul Romain is now part of the government, and now Christophe about to be crowned as king in their hometown, right, in their stomping grounds of northern Haiti, right? Now Christophe, super rich, super powerful, got his beautiful wife right beside him, about to be, crowned as queen. He probably remember Christophe's wife from back in the day when that was just his girlfriend. So Paul Romain, a day one homie of Christophe, and if he wrote a book, that would be a book that I would love to read. Unfortunately, I don't think Paul Romain left any writings behind, but if he did, that would be an account that I would love to read. Now let's continue. His Excellency, Lieutenant General Paul Romain, organ of the Grand Council, expressed himself in these following terms. He said, "The Council of State has the honor of presenting to your majesty the constitutional law, the preparation of which was the object of his deepest meditations. We will have fulfilled the expectations of the people and the army, and our work will have corresponded to the wishes of our brothers. If the fundamental basis on which the new kingdom will rest knows how to worthily reconcile public happiness with the majesty of the throne and the dignity of national representation, this day of eternal memory, when the Haitian people will recognize before the face of heaven and earth their protector, their father, and their king, and the generous mortal who saved them, penetrates our souls with the most delicious emotions. At the sight of the diadem that will rest on the august brow where our glorious destinies are written, tremble the enemies of our country. This moment has forever decided the sovereignty of these places, and it is that of the triumph for all hearts, since they finally crowned their king. To the magnanimous arm of Christophe, the scepter belonged. It is the attribute of true courage and fortune, always docile to the voice of genius, pays him at this moment the price of 20 years of labor. Haitians, raise your arrogant heads. No longer be alarmed by your great prosperity and address thanksgiving to heaven for when Christophe ascends the throne, having been reborn. Now, in the book, it actually writes down what Christophe responded to General Paul Romain. So Paul Romain just said that to Christophe, like I said, his day one homie from way back in the day, from before the revolution, right? Now, Christophe responded to that amazing speech, and he said this: "Gentlemen, I have no other happiness than that of the Haitian people, whose labors I have shared, and nothing that concerns the good of the state can be foreign to me. The nation has deemed it necessary for its prosperity and safety to elevate me to the throne and to fix the inheritance within my family. I comply with its wish, since it contributes to public happiness. This day, by giving me the measure of all hearts, this will be constantly present in my mind and will remind me of what the Haitian people have done for me and my family. And every moment of my life will be devoted to rewarding them for their filial tenderness. I will be on the throne as I was in adversity, as befits a good king, and may my descendants inherit the pure love with which I burn for the homeland." Now, that was the end of Christophe's response. Now, it goes back to General Paul Romain. Let's continue. "Then, His Excellency, Lieutenant General Paul Romain, addressing Her Majesty the Queen, he said," now this is what Paul Romain said to the Queen, Christophe's wife. He said this: "Madame, we have just had the honor of presenting to your husband the constitutional law which fixes forever the destiny of Haiti, at the same time as it makes hereditary in the family of our sovereign the monarchy of the state. If anything can add to the sweet sensations that currently thrill our souls, it is to see the eminent qualities with which heaven has endowed you, seated near the throne to which the love and gratitude of the Haitians have raised you. 1,000 thanks given to the Almighty, who seems to have raised so high the sensitivity, the generous kindness with which your heart is the sanctuary, only to put them more within reach of extending their happy influence over the entire country. The Council of State glorifies in placing at your Majesty's feet the tribute of love, respect, gratitude, and admiration that your virtues know so well how to inspire." Now, wow. Now it actually writes down what Christophe's wife, the Queen, Queen Marie-Louise, what she responded to General Paul Romain. Now this is crazy. Do you know how exclusive it is to get some ancient literature of what Queen Marie-Louise said? Bro, this is super exclusive. Bro, never before seen. Let's get into it. The Queen said this: "Gentlemen, the name of Queen that the nation has just bestowed upon me binds me even more, particularly to the fate of the Haitian people, for whom I have always prided myself on being a tender mother. I will not forget on the throne the duties imposed by the Royal Majesty, and when my family is destined to take its place there, it is enough to enlighten me on the extreme amount that I must bring to its education. Yes, my children will be my dearest adornment, since the destiny of my homeland must one day depend on them." Now, time out. Shout out to Queen Marie-Louise, real up north girly, right? Real up north representative, real up north representative. Shout out to Queen Marie-Louise, husband, king of the north. Marie-Louise, born and raised in the north, real up north, type vibes going on in the kingdom. Let's continue. Now, in the next part of the book, it goes into a constitutional law from the State Council. So this is a declaration coming from the Council of State. It said this: "The Council of State extraordinarily assembled for the purpose of deliberating on the changes that it is necessary to make to the Constitution of the state, and on the best order of government that suits us. Considering that when the Constitution of February 1807 was promulgated, the state found itself, strictly speaking, without a social pact, and the storms of civil war raged with such force that they did not allow us, the representatives of the people, to irrevocably fix the only mode of government that truly suited us. That Constitution, however formless it appears to be, and whose imperfection these same representatives did not dispel, was then suited to the crisis in which it had taken birth, and to the temples which surrounded its cradle. This small number of sublime principles which it contains nevertheless suffice for the happiness of the people whose rights it established in those deplorable times. Considering that today, thanks to the genius of the Supreme Magistrate who holds the reins of government, whose lofty conceptions and brilliant valor have been able to restore order, happiness, and prosperity to the nation, the flourishing state of culture, commerce, and navigation, the reestablishment of morals, morality, and religion, the high discipline established in the military and the fleet, seems to promise an eternal duration to the state. Because of that, It is appropriate today more than ever to establish a stable order of things, a mode of government that must forever govern the country that saw us born, considering that it is time to invest sovereignty, authority, with a beloved great qualification which conveys the idea of the majesty of power. The erection of a hereditary throne is the necessary consequence of this powerful consideration, the inheritance of power to legitimate children only in an illustrious family, constantly devoted to the glory and happiness of the country which owes its political existence, is as much a duty as a shining mark of national recognition. The nation, which in this name through our organs makes use of its will and its sovereignty by entrusting them to the one who raised it from the abyss and precipices where its most bitter enemies wanted to annihilate it, to the one who now governs it with such glory that this nation has no need to fear for its liberty, its independence, or its happiness, that it is also appropriate to establish great dignities and to much raise the splendor of the throne, as to reward distinguished service rendered to the country by officers who devote themselves to the happiness, glory, and prosperity of the state. Now, I think it goes into a declaration. This was the official declaration, I believe, that, officially acknowledged Christophe as the king of the Northern Territory. It said this: Christophe is declared King of Haiti. This title, its prerogatives, and immunities will be hereditary in his family. All acts of the kingdom will be in the name of the king, promulgated and published under the royal seal. In the absence of male children in the direct line, the inheritance will pass to the family of the prince closest to the king or the oldest dignitary. However, the king will be at liberty to adopt the children of any prince of the kingdom he deems appropriate in the absence of an heir. Now, time out. I just want to say, I have nothing against democracy, but how come we have not yet prospered in the modern era under democracy? How come all of our brightest moments have came under non-democratic leaders? Christophe would be qualified as a non-democratic leader. I mean, a king, a monarch, but under his rule came order, prosperity, discipline. Why can't we achieve the same thing under so-called democratic leadership? How come when it comes to democratic leadership, everything just crashes and burns, but under non-democratic leadership, progress gets made? Why is that? I don't know why that is. Anyway, let's continue. Upon the death of the king, and until his successor is recognized, the affairs of the kingdom shall be governed by the ministers and the king's council, and will deliberate by majority vote. The Secretary of State keeps the register of deliberations. The king's wife is declared the Queen of Haiti. The members of the royal family will bear the title of princes and princesses. They are called royal highnesses. The heir presumptive is called the prince royal. These princes are members of the Council of State as soon as they have reached the age of majority. The royal princes and princesses may not marry without the king's authorization. The king himself organizes his palace in a manner consistent with the dignity of the crown. Palaces and castles shall be established according to the king's orders, in the palaces of the kingdom that he deems appropriate to designate. The prince is a minor until the age of 15. During his minority, a regent of the kingdom shall be appointed. The regent shall be at least 25 years of age and shall be chosen from among the princes closest to the king's relatives. In the absence of a regent being designated by the king, the Grand Council shall appoint one in the manner prescribed in the preceding article. The regent may not conclude any treaty of peace, alliance, or commerce, nor make any declaration of war, except after mature deliberation and with the advice of the Grand Council. The opinion will be expressed by a majority of votes, and in the event of a tie, the one found to be in accordance with the opinion of the regent will carry the balance. The regent may not appoint to the great dignities of the kingdom, nor to positions of general officers of the army or the navy. All acts of the regent are in the name of the minor king. The custody of the minor king is entrusted to his mother, and in her absence, to the prince designated by the deceased king. Neither the regent nor his descendants may be elected for the custody of the minor king. The Grand Council and the Privy Council. The Grand Council is composed of the princes of the blood, the princes, dukes, and counts appointed, and at the choice of his majesty, who himself fixes the number. The council is presided over by the king, and when he does not preside over it himself, he designates one of the dignitaries of the kingdom to complete the function. Now, if you take a look up on the screen, these are some of the signatories of the kingdom, right? Those who signed on the document of the Constitution, the Royal Constitution of 1811, right? As you can see, the first signature, like I said before, Paul Romain, right? The ancestor Paul Romain, Christophe's day one homie, right? Shout out to the ancestor Paul Romain. Then you have Andre Vernet, another beloved, another incomparable, another legendary ancestor, Andre Vernet, right? Then we have Toussaint Brave, right? Then we have Jean-Philippe Doe, right? Then we have Marcel Bess, right? Then we have Jean-Pierre Richard. Then we have Jean Fleury. Then we have Jean-Baptiste Juge. Then we have Etienne Magny, very formidable general, very famous general, Etienne Magny. And shout out to the legendary ancestors, man. Shout out to the forefathers. Now, I believe this is a collective declaration from those gentlemen that I just mentioned. They said this on the document. We, the general officers of land and sea, administrators of finance and officers of justice, both in our own name and in that of the army and the people, we sign, of which we are the organs, join in heart and mind with the Council of State for the proclamation of His Majesty Christophe, the King of Haiti, our wish and that of the people and the army, having been such for a long time. Now it goes into a series of even more signatures of legendary ancestors and forefathers, right? Now, Cornel Brel, that was the Archbishop. I'm not going to label him as a forefather, but, he's just a Catholic Archbishop. But then you had Prince Joachim. I recognize that name. Noel Joachim, the first one. Then you have Runez. Then you have Lieutenant General Pierre Toussaint. Then you have General Raphael. Then you have General Louis Akil. Then you have General Charles Charlot. Then you have General Coteroux. Then you have General Jasmine. Then you have Prévost, right? The author of the book. So the author of the book, he signed it. I see his name right there, Prévost, right? Then you have DuPont. Then you have Charles Pierre. Then you have General Guerriere. Oh, I think, you know who that is? I think that was a future president. He would go on to be a president in like a few decades later down the line. I think that was Philippe Guerriere. Then you have General General Simon. Then you have General Placide Lebrun. Now it switches from the generals, then it goes to the field marshals, right? Field Marshal Bastien Jean-Baptiste. Then you have Field Marshal Pierre Saint-Jean. Then it goes to the next rank from the field marshals to the rear admirals, right? Rear Admiral Almanjor Fils. Rear Admiral Henry Poix. Rear Admiral Chevalier, Rear Admiral Papalier, Rear Admiral Raymond, Rear Admiral Sicard, Ferrier, Dossou, Cazé. Then it goes to Brigadier Generals, Brigadier General Bastien Fabien, Brigadier General Cadet Antoine, Brigadier General Bernardine Sprue. Then it goes to Divisional Generals of the Marines, Stanislas Latortue, Joseph Latortue. Now, I'm just going to go down the names, Jean-Baptiste Petit, Charrier, Raphael, Isaac, Chanlat, Dupuis, etc., etc. I also see a name of Boyer written down, but I think that was somebody else. I don't think that was the Southern military general. I think that was a different individual who also went by the name Boyer. But anyways, man, I think I can end part 3 right here. I'm gonna end part 3 right here. Yeah, man. Anyways, as you already know, just the other day I dropped my first ever music video, and it's right on time, entitled Cap Henry in 1814. Should be the pinned comment at the top as well as in the description. Check it out. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy the music. Enjoy the video, man. Subscribe to the Patreon, NTD 1814. Link in the description. Anyways, man, got love for y'all. It's your boy Neferkari, that's Celine, and I'm gone. Peace.
Yeah. We back. Spreading my wings and I had to get fly. Up at the top, an incredible vibe. Came from the bottom, I'm up in the sky. Give one look and said, baby, you fine. Wake up each morning and handle my business. They just be talking, you see me, I live. Ride on my enemies, sounding like thunder. 1804, got that shit in my spirit. 1804 when I step in the building. 1804, that's word of my mother. Rock my women and die for my brother. Never gonna fall when I'm deep under pressure. Tell them we back and they better accept it. Move like a king, every step is divine. Ride on my enemies with no exception. Taking revenge and I'm taking what's mine. Told me she loved me and said that it's real. So independent, ain't signing no deal. Feel like a king and I'm up in Cap Henry. I'm in the citadel, top of the hill. Trying to run up and we let off a cannon. Secret location, I'm keeping it sealed. You ain't retaliate, Franco Medina. Came to the country and he got killed. You ain't retaliate, Rafi and Mans. Thought you was loyal, thought you was real. Didn't even want to come pick up the body. Had your man locked up, he died in the cell. Up at the palace, I'm throwing a party. Right on the south and I'm giving them hell. And my little shorty, she looking exotic. African features, she casting a spell. Run to the check like I work on my fitness. Wake up each morning and handle my business. Said that she love me, she want my genetics. Wanna get married and make it official. Wanna get married and have my babies. Up in the city, I'm riding Mercedes. Up in the city, they treat me like royalty. Feeling like Dolph, talking about lords. Spreading my wings and I had to get fly. Up in the top, an incredible vibe. Came from the bottom, I'm up in the sky. Everyone look and said, baby, you fine. Wake up each morning and handle my business. They just be talking, you see me, I live. Ride on my enemies, sounding like thunder. 1804, got that shit in my spirit. 1804 when I step in the building. 1804, and that's word of my mother. Rock my women and die for my brother. Never gon' fall when I'm deep under pressure. Tell them we back and they better accept it. Move like a king, every step is divine. Ride on my enemies with no exception. Taking revenge and I'm taking what's mine. Pour up a drink and it's time that we toast. Watching my back, keep my enemies close. Only the family, I stick with my brothers. Cannons position outside of the coast. Heavy artillery for the protection. Move like a general, stick to the code. Feel like a king when I'm up in the north. Beautiful women, they trying to get chose. Launch an invasion all over the south. Capture the capital with all my woes. Look at my energy and my demeanor. Dripping that ice and that's head to my toes. Lately I'm flexing all on the Americans. Flexing my muscle on missing my road. Just got a carriage just coming from London. Boy, that shit cash, I ain't taking no loans. Boy, that shit cash, that's fresh on the boat. Enemy know I got millions in gold. Enemy know I got choppers and cannons. How did I do it? They can't understand it. How did I do it? It's cause I'm relentless. Call me King Harry, my name is cemented. Call me King Harry, I'm up in the palace. Call me King Harry, I'm raising the status. Feeling untouchable, energy sacred. When I pull up, know my enemies hate it. Setting up shop at a secret location. Chopper gon' sound like a standing ovation. Moving in silence, I never been regular. One of a kind, I ain't got no competitors. Son of a king, I'm the kingdom inheritor. Do what I want, I don't care what you telling us. Say to myself, me and my team.